this segment, I'm going to show you how to install and configure the FreeProxy Internet Suite that will get you going with any type of quick and dirty proxy server that you may need, because every now and then we need a proxy server. We need to either cache, redirect, or maybe even block some sites. You can even share an internet connection using a proxy server. When that is necessary, an easy one to install is FreeProxy. So the first thing we need to do is go out to the internet and get ourselves a copy of the FreeProxy Internet Suite. Let's go ahead and take a look at my computer, and I'll show you how to do that now. So all we got to do is open up our browser of choice. Use Internet Explorer for this, because most of us that are running Windows, this will work also. This will work in Windows XP, we're at Windows 7. I'm using 8.1. Obviously, it's going to work there. And I don't have Windows 10 yet, but hopefully that will work there as well. So all we have to do is go to the correct website here, and just go to my address bar and type in www.handcraftedsoftware.org, not .com. That takes you to the producers of this lovely little piece of software. So all we have to do now is find the download link. It does have some FreeProxy releases here, but I find that the download link tends to work best. So right at the top of their page here, we have a download. We just click that, and it takes us to the download area. After that, we just find the download link, which is right here. I click on that, and it'll take me to a page. They want to go ahead and verify that you're actually a human. You're not just downloading a bot downloading software. So they give us a nice little verification here with a security code. Just type that in and hit download. It should download the software, and it says you are downloading the software now. It is a very small download, so it shouldn't take you very long. I'm going to go ahead and hit save when prompted, and once that's complete, we should have the entire package. At that point, you could use MD5 hashing to check the integrity and verify that if you need to, but it's such a small download. If it gets corrupted in download, just try to re-download it. As we can see, I've only got a few seconds remaining. It shouldn't just be much more than that. Once that's done, we'll go ahead and run the installer, which is a very simple installation package. 6 seconds to go, almost there. And we are done. Excellent. So my computer's now going to run the security scan. That should just take a few seconds, which is done with, and I can hit close. That saved that to my downloads file. So now all I have to do, our folder, now all I have to do is go there and unzip the zip file. So I'm going to go ahead and close out Internet Explorer, because right now we don't need it. If I just open up my file browser and then I go to downloads, that should let me see that FreeProxy zip. Now all we need to do is extract all the files within there, and that should give us access to the setup. So I'm just going to right click and extract all. I'm just going to extract it here, but you can choose wherever you like to extract files to. And it's almost done, and there we go. We now have the setup, and I can double click that, and that will start my UAC prompt asking me, do you really want to install this? Is this software that you're actually trying to install? It is, so I'm going to go ahead and hit run. So I hit run, again get prompted with the UAC, hit yes, and I am now within the FreeProxy Internet Suite wizard for installation. This is a very basic installation. We're basically going to next our way through this, but we'll make sure that we don't miss anything that seems important. So right now, it's just going to click next, asking if you accept the license agreement or not. You're not going to be able to get very far if you don't, so my suggestion is to click accept and click next. It's asking you where would you like to install this at. The default path is usually the best path. Unless you are used to doing another way, then you can browse and choose your path. Otherwise, just choose the defaults and click next. Again, if I'd like to create a folder to put all these things in, I can browse to that now, or I can just go with the defaults, which is exactly what I'm going to do. So click next, and I should be good to go. It gives me an overview of the selections that I've made, and when I'm ready, I click install. This shouldn't take more than just a few seconds. Again, it's a very small package. Yet for a very powerful piece of software, you'll see in just a moment, this thing will allow us to have a lot of control over how our users access the internet. So I'm done with that. As you can see, it's all good. Everything installed correctly. I had no errors. I can click next and then finish. Once I'm done with that, I can close my other windows. I no longer need the setup icon. You can delete it or just leave it. I tend to save software like this, so I'll do that. So now that I have the software installed, I need to run the software. Now, if you're running Windows XP or Windows 7 or even Vista, if that's your pleasure, you should just be able to go to Start and All Programs, and you'll see it there. For here on 8.1, as we know, we go to the little Windows icon in the bottom left-hand corner, and then I prefer to use the little search feature. Makes things easy. And if I just type in free, I should see this FreeProxy Control Center. That is the exe that runs the actual software. Now, word of advice here, you do want to run this as an administrator, otherwise you're not going to be able to start the service. You'll be able to make changes, but the service won't run, and that kind of defeats the whole purpose of this thing. So we need to run this as administrator. So I'm going to right click on that and just hit run as administrator. Again, my lovely UAC prompt, and I tell it yes. And as we can see, it's firing up the FreeProxy Internet Suite. That should take us to the management console, giving us all the ability to make changes, start services, add users, set all the defaults that we would like to change and make it run the way we need it to run. So what I'm going to do is, now that we have the console open, as you can see here, it's very, very simple, not a fancy dancy program, but it gets right to the point. I like to expand it out a little bit because you can't see all the icons unless you do. You'll see that we have a few things already kind of defined. Proxy, which is basically the service that is a proxy service. Some users defined and some options as well, talking about a ban list. And we're going to get into all this as well. It's pretty simple and straightforward to set these things up, but you just need to know the correct order in which to do this. So I'm going to walk you through that now. First thing we need to do is set up some users. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to use the service. So you see right here, under these tab little icons, you have users, and this is where we can create the users for our system. So if I click on that, I get this lovely little users and groups box that allows me to create both users and groups, even though it's kind of funny, even though it only said users when you click the button. So I'm going to just kind of expand this out just a little bit. And we need to create at least one user, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click on users and click add. This is going to give me my user creation dialog box. Pretty straightforward, asking me for a username. I'll make one for myself and just use first initial last name. Give a description. I'll say I'm a proxy user. Way kind of, if I'm looking at things from a higher elevation, I'll know exactly what's going on. And here's where I need to define a password for those users. Now you can leave it blank, but if you're going to use any kind of authentication, which if you are doing this, you probably would want to do that, you need to go ahead and put a password in for that user at this point. I'm just going to put a simple password in for testing purposes and demonstration. So I'll just use password and then confirm it. And then make sure that that box is checked, which it is by default, but in case it got unchecked, just verify that it's there, that the user is actually enabled so they can use the system. So I'm going to click done, and now I have a proxy user. Pretty simple. Now what I need to do is create a group for the proxy users. Also just about as simple as creating a group. If I go up into groups, and I highlight groups, and I click add, it will give me the group add dialog box. Very simple as well, just asking for a name and a description. Right here I'll just make proxy users, or I'll call it proxy group, so that I can put my contains proxy users. Pretty simple and straightforward. Click done, and now I have my proxy group. Now the next thing I need to do is actually add my users into the group that I've created. It's even more simple than you would imagine. Basically just drag and drop, I think. Let me see here. Maybe it wasn't drag and drop. Oh, I'm sorry. One second. I'm getting a little clicky ahead of myself. Let me click on here, and I want to I think I want to add. Yes, that's exactly right. So I hit add. I thought I drag and drop. That's not correct. But now it's asking me, who do I want to include in this group? It's pulling from the list of users that it sees available. And since there's only one, that's the only one I see. If there were more, you would have those list of users and you can select the ones that you want. But right now I only have one, so that makes it pretty simple. I click my own name there and click done. Now that you can see that my username is actually underneath here, it's also here as well, but that's what we want to see. We want to see that our user is in the proper group so that we can use that group to add as like a security assignment to the proxy server itself, letting it know who has access and who does not. Now that that's done, we can click done, making things very simple. And you think this is, now we're going to get into the proxy. No, not quite yet. We want to go ahead and define a set of rules that these users are going to encounter when they use the service itself. So let's go over to this ban list. And even though it says ban list, and you can ban things if you would like, but you also do a myriad of other things, redirection, and a couple other stuff. But we'll take a look at some simple things just to get our feet wet. So I'll click on ban list. And the first thing we notice, and this is probably the one of the few times that I found this to not be as intuitive as I would have liked it to be, but still it's not too difficult. Once you figure out what they're asking for, it's pretty easy to navigate. Right now what we need to do is create a new ban list. So if I click new, and then you see it kind of highlights in that untitled, don't worry about that quite yet. What we need to do is just start defining what we want to have in our ban list. So here, we'll go ahead and click down here and click add. And now we can add a category. Things like restricted sites. And ban list, it kind of makes sense. We'll do a restricted sites list. So I'll just call it restricted sites. Now it's asking me what I want to do when someone meets this URL. Do I want to redirect them to a URL, an error page that I've created that's locally hosted on the server itself, or do I want to use a standard error page that they've created for the system? I'm just going to go ahead and stay with the standard display because I didn't create a response, and we'll do address redirection in just a second. So we'll do that, and we'll just say display to standard response and click none. Or done, I'm sorry, not none. Now that that's done, now what I need to do is define what is getting restricted. What sites do I not want them to go to? Who is going to receive the forbidden error when they try to go to a site? What sites cause that? So if I go down to where it says manage category details, that's where I can start to define those options. If I click that, you'll notice that this down here starts to come alive. You see it got highlighted. It's no longer grayed out. And now I need to add a URL or IP address. I can do this for local resources, so if I want to go by IP address, that's fine. But normally this is for internet type options, and this is where I find it to be most helpful. So I'm going to click add URL, and I'll just click a URL. Word of advice here, you don't add www to it. You just type in, like, let's say I wanted to keep people from going to social media sites on my small network. I can go ahead and just put facebook.com, twitter.com, Instagram.com, things of that nature, and that will stop them from going there, from typing in that address. So I'll do that. We'll do facebook.com and click done. We'll add a couple more here. We'll say twitter.com and click done, and then add one more. We'll say instagram.com and click done. So now I have a few sites that are being actually blocked. If you try to go to them, you'll get an access denied page. Let's go ahead and create another category, and we'll do this one for redirection. So let's say I don't want anybody going to Bing, right? I'm a system administrator and I hate Bing and I hate Yahoo. I'm a Google fanatic. I want everybody to use Google because it's the easiest thing, especially if I'm asking them to do a search on their own site and they're going to Yahoo and they're getting different search results. I want to try to avoid that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redirect any of these other sites to go straight to Google to make it easier for myself. So what I'll do is I'll call this search engines, or search engine redirect. It's a little more descriptive. And I'll say when a URL is accessed, redirect to a URL. And down here I'll just put in Google, Google starts with a G, .com, and then click done. So now when anybody goes to any of the sites that I'm about to create or add to the list, they'll be redirected to google.com. So I need to click on that to highlight it and then say manage category details. Now I can add my addresses here or my URLs. So I'll click the URL, I'll say bing.com and done, and I'll also add yahoo.com for good measure and say done. Just to keep it easy, a couple of them. All right, so now we've got our ban list created. Pretty straightforward. I need to actually save it, which is a good thing. That way I'll basically export this as a file and we can use it if we install this on another server. I can just copy that file and the ban list is there. Don't have to redo my work. So I hit save as, and I'll call this server1 ban. There we go. And hit save. Now the last thing I have to do is activate the ban file. If you don't activate the ban file, then it won't take effect. So we got to make sure to do that. So all we have to do is hit activate, and we'll get this. It says this ban file has been set as the ban list for this configuration. I hit OK. I'm good to go with that. I can now hit done and my ban list is set, my users are set. I am now ready to actually set up the proxy server itself. So right now you'll see that they have already gone ahead and added a proxy server service for HTTP into this as a default, but that's cool. We can go in here and just edit it to our necessary needs, whatever we have to have it as. I'll just double click on it and it'll take me to the properties. And this is where the meat and potatoes actually happen, right? So we want to give it a name. I'm going to call this just Proxy SRV, so I know it's a proxy service. And you'll notice that the protocol says HTTP proxy. If you slip down, you can see that there's proxies for POP, tunnels, SMTP, Telnet, FTP, SOCKS, and even news. So very cool. You have a lot of different ways in which you can proxy with this little service, and it's such a small program. It's nice to have. So if you need any of one of those quick and dirty, this is also a great product for that as well. But I'm going to click HTTP proxy. You'll notice that the client port says 8080. Traditionally, that is a proxy port. You can make it any port that you like. Just make sure that you know what it is you set it as, so that when you set other settings, you know what port to use. So if you need to make firewall adjustments or anything like that, you've got that port. But I'm going to leave it at 8080. It's very simple. Now the local binding, this was something that can be confusing. What it's asking you is if you have multiple network interface cards in your system, do you want to bind the proxy server to any specific one? And then if that has multiple IP addresses or anything like that, would you like to bind a specific IP? Since I only have one actual network interface on this device, I can leave it unset and it just defaults to that. But if I had multiple and I wanted to choose one, that's where I would do it. And the same is true for remote binding. If I wanted an incoming access to the server coming in on a certain port, or I'm sorry, network interface, I could choose it there as well. But since I only have one, all traffic's only going to go in and out one way, so I can leave that unset. And now over here we have this use proxy server. If I had another proxy server set up and I wanted to proxy a proxy, that is where I would set that. But I don't have that going on. But all you have to do is check that and give it the IP address of the proxy server. Make sure you have the right port set, and you would be able to proxy through another proxy. But that's all good. Now if I want to create a log file, I can set that as well. But we're going to stick with a lot of the defaults right now because we're trying quick and dirty setup, right? Over here under HTTP options, this is where it can get a little tricky. This does have the ability to integrate with an Active Directory domain and pull user accounts and usernames and passwords, authenticate using AD. So you can set that up here as well. But if you're just using it as a standalone server, trying to set up a proxy, we're going to go with basic authentication to make it easy. So all I have to do is click Use HTTP Authentication and then keep it as basic. I could have used any of the others as well, but basic is the simplest. Over here where it says realm, you just need to create a realm name so that it can differentiate between any other realm that you might have. Just make it any name that you want. I'm just going to call it proxy. Then we click permissions, and this is where we're going to say, I have a group of users and they need to have access to this proxy service. So all we have to do is once we click permissions, then you notice that this dialog box opens up. We have the ability to add a resource, and that's what we need to do. So we add a resource, and it gives us some types. There's a few different types, and we're going to set at least two of them, or we are going to set two of them. One is going to be HTTP proxy service, because that's what we want to do. We want to have that as a service, and people that are trying to access this are granted access, not forbidden. I could have done it the other way as well. And then from what group? And I'm going to pick the group that we created, the proxy group. So anybody within that group should have the ability to access or be proxied by the service. I do like to use this user must authenticate to gain access to this resource. That way unauthorized users aren't able to gain access. They have to actually type in a username and a password. So I'm going to click done there, and then I'm going to add our ban list. And that ban list is so that it would actually apply as a user logs in and starts to use it and the proxy server is working against its user account. We want that ban list to apply so they get redirected or stopped from going to the sites that we've set in that list. So I need to add another resource. Just change this to say ban list or URL or IP address. You'll notice it defaults over to forbidden, and then again we choose the group, proxy groups, and that they must authenticate. If I click done, should be good to go now. I can click done. My proxy service is now set up. I click done here, and it's going to give you this warning. It's going to say a lot of stuff about the local binding. Just trying to remind you to make sure that you have those set as necessary. you can just go ahead and yes your way out of this. If we're not binding anything, it won't give you any problems. All right, so now we can go to start and stop the service. And this is where that logging on as an administrator thing came in handy. So right now, I just click that and I click start the service. This says the current file must be saved. It normally says this anytime you click start the service. And it's just basically asking you, do you want to save this configuration? Obviously we do, so we're going to say okay. And you'll notice now the service is running and we can click okay. The service is now running on this system and they should be being proxied. One caveat, normally we would set proxying in the Internet Explorer settings, or if you're running Google Chrome, Firefox, any other browser, there's usually a proxy area to set. Say, hey, I want you to use a proxy server for web browsing. In Internet Explorer, it's under the Connections tab. We're going to take a look at that. But normally this would be set at the domain level or as a group policy object, something to that effect. But if you only have a few machines, you can come by each machine and do them individually and then save that. It makes it pretty simple. All you have to do really is open up IE is one of the simple ways to do it. You'll notice it doesn't give me any problems or anything like that. I can go into the settings here where it says Internet Options, and then we have this Connections tab, and that's the important part. Under that, you see LAN settings, which is going to take you to the area that we need to actually get this up and running. So I click on that, and then we have this nice proxy server area, and I can click on this proxy server area, add the address of my server, which I wrote down beforehand, which is 10.1.230.187, and then make sure you know your port. Remember, it was 8080 is what I set it to. And if you want to, you can click on Advanced, and you can uncheck this if you want, but since this would be the proxy server I would be using for all of these different, like FTP, SOCKS, HTTPS or secure, those SSL, I'm sorry, or SSH, I'm sorry, you're right, SSL or TLS security, any of those pages would also go through the proxy server as well. So I just keep that normally checked off. So I'll click OK, and then I'll click OK here, and that should activate the fact that I want to use proxy service. So I'll click OK, and then just either wait or restart my browser. So I'll go ahead and just restart my browser, and we should be greeted by a prompt asking for a username and a password, unless I typed in the wrong IP address, and I'm not seeing it yet. So let's verify I've got the right IP address. So I'm going to click on that, say CMD and IP config, which should be 10.1.230.187. So let's just make sure that I actually have everything running correctly here. Internet options and connections, LAN settings, and there we go. I must have not saved my configuration, so I got to go back in there, just make sure that's in there. It's an easy thing to do. 1.230.187, and then click OK. Then click OK. And now I got the little spinning Cheerio. I might actually get a prompt here in a second. And let's go ahead and close out the browser, reopen the browser, and hopefully I get a prompt. Proxy server is not responding. I must have not set the correct port. Let's set that. Well, Mr. Lowry, you got to check those ports. Let's go to connections. You're getting a good lesson on checking these settings. There we go, 8080, there we go. Hit OK. Now we should see the action. And let's just go ahead and close this browser one more time. Hopefully, there we go. Now we're getting that username and password that we expected to see. That's what we want. Now we know that it's actually going through the proxy server itself. So I can type in my username, DLowry, and then my password of password. And if I wanted to make sure that I always am hitting the proxy server, I can uncheck that. Remember my credentials. That way I always get prompted every time I open a new browser to insert my credentials. So just go ahead and hit OK there. You notice it just takes me to IT Pro TV. Really cool. But let's check some of those things. I shouldn't be able to get to things like Facebook. So if I go to Facebook, www.facebook.com, I should get an error. As you can see, as reported, it says that access to this resource is forbidden. I'm going to get the same thing if I go to Instagram or Twitter, because that's what we set up. Now, the other thing we set up was redirection. Remember, I didn't want people using Bing or Yahoo. I wanted them to use Google. So if I try to go to Bing, let's see here, www.bing.com, I hit enter, you'll notice it takes me to Google. It doesn't take me to Bing. And the same thing would happen if I clicked on Yahoo or tried to go to Yahoo. It would redirect me to those as well. So this is a very simple, straightforward way to get some proxying going on. You set those settings up for the proxy server in the internet options of your Windows machine, and it should work also for Google Chrome and Firefox as well. They should pick that up from there. That being said, that is how you install FreeProxy internet services on a Windows machine.